My stepmother chopped off my hair out of jealousy, but karma came faster than any of us expected. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 17 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my hair has been one of the things that made me feel special. It wasn't just hair to me, it felt like a piece of who I was. Thick chestnut strands that reached all the way down to my waist, the kind of hair that made strangers stop and tell me how beautiful it was. I never bragged about it, but I took care of it like it was something precious. When I was 10, my world turned upside down. My mom passed away, and life never felt the same after that. My dad did his best to hold everything together, but grief has a way of leaving holes you can't just patch up. A couple of years later, he remarried. That's how Vanessa entered our lives. At first, I thought she was just trying too hard. She was always dressed up, always wearing makeup, always acting like every room was a competition. But it didn't take long for me to realize she wasn't just trying hard, she was watching me. Every little thing about me seemed to bother her, though she tried to cover it with smiles when Dad was around. It started small. She'd make little remarks, the kind of comments that sound innocent on the surface but cut when you really heard them. If I was getting ready for school and brushed my hair in the mirror, she'd pass by and say, "You know, not everyone looks good with hair that long." If one of Dad's friends mentioned I looked like my mom, Vanessa's smile would stiffen before she quickly changed the subject. Sometimes it felt like she was keeping score, even though I never signed up to play her game. If I wore a dress to a family dinner, she'd wear something flashier and later whisper to her daughter Sophie about how some girls think they're princesses. She thought I couldn't hear, but I always did. I didn't want to admit it, but over time, I noticed how her eyes lingered whenever people complimented. It wasn't admiration, it was something sharper, something closer to resentment. I never understood why. She was older, she had her own daughter, and she was married to my dad. But it was like none of that was enough if I was in the picture. It's a strange kind of pain when the person who's supposed to be part of your family looks at you not with love, but with envy. At 17, I had gotten used to her sly comments, but I had no idea how far she would eventually go to prove that she could take something from me, just because she couldn't stand the sight of me having it. My dad's name is Robert Carter. He's the kind of man who will work late hours, then still come home with takeout, so no one has to cook. He's gentle, patient, and the type of dad who never forgets to ask how your day was. I know he loves me, and in his heart, he thinks he's giving me everything I need. But when it comes to Vanessa, he just can't see the truth. She hides her claws so well that to him, she looks like the perfect wife. Vanessa has a daughter from her first marriage, Sophie. She's 15, 2 years younger than me, and in many ways the opposite of me. Where I speak my mind, Sophie stays quiet. She bends to her mom's moods, always trying to make her happy. I don't think Sophie really believes half of what Vanessa says, but she's learned the easiest way to live in that house is to go along with it. She's caught in the middle, though she'd never admit it. From the outside, we might look like a blended family, but inside that house, it never felt like one. I was the extra piece, the one who didn't fit into Vanessa's picture. She made it clear in ways my dad never picked up on. If Sophie got a new pair of shoes, Vanessa made a show of it. She'd point out how stylish they were, how much Sophie deserved them. If I happened to get something new, Vanessa's compliments always had a sharp edge. "That's a pretty dress, Emily. It's just a shame not everyone can pull off colors like that." She'd say things like that with a smile so wide, my dad thought it was kindness. Meals at the table often turned into performances. If I mentioned a good grade, Vanessa quickly praised Sophie for something small, like cleaning her room, just to shift attention away from me. Sometimes she went further, making little digs. "Emily's smart, sure, but you know how she can be a little careless." My dad would laugh softly and say I was still young, missing completely how those words landed. What made it worse was the way Vanessa could change in an instant. When Dad walked into the room, her whole tone softened. She'd ask me how school was, call me sweetheart, even though 5 minutes earlier she'd been criticizing the way I did my hair. She wore kindness like a mask, one she only put on when my dad was in the room. Over time, I started to feel like a stranger in my own home. Sophie and Vanessa were their own team, and my dad, without realizing it, leaned toward keeping peace instead of noticing the imbalance. That left me on the outside, holding my breath every time I walked into the kitchen or sat on the couch. It wasn't open cruelty, at least not in a way Dad could see, but it was steady, like a drip of water that never stopped, wearing me down day by day. The spring dance was all anyone at school could talk about. In our town, it wasn't just another event, it was the event. People picked out their outfits weeks in advance, and everyone knew who was going with who. For me, it became even more important when Jake Miller asked me to go with him. Jake wasn't just another guy. He was the one I'd had a crush on since freshman year. Tall, easygoing, the kind of person everyone liked, but he never acted stuck up about it. When he asked me, I nearly thought he was joking. But when I saw he meant it, I felt like I was floating. That night, I couldn't stop talking about it. My best friend, Hannah, came over, and we sat on my bed, surrounded by open magazines and half-finished plans. We were trying to figure out hairstyles, dresses, and what shoes I should wear. I laughed more in that hour than I had in weeks. For once, I wasn't thinking about Vanessa or the constant tension in the house. I was just a 17-year-old girl excited about a dance. But of course, the walls in that house never kept secrets for long. Vanessa passed by my room at just the wrong time. Or maybe the wrong time for me, the perfect time for her. The door wasn't closed all the way, and she stopped outside. I didn't notice her at first, but later I realized she must have heard everything. She heard me tell Hannah how nervous I was about Jake, how I couldn't believe he chose me, and how I wanted the night to feel perfect. When I finally caught sight of her in the hallway, she was just standing there, silent, with that look on her face. Not shock, not even disapproval, something colder. Her eyes moved over me in a way that made my skin crawl, as if me being happy was something she couldn't allow. She didn't say a word then, just walked off like she hadn't been listening. But I knew better. The rest of the evening, her mood shifted in ways I couldn't ignore. She was sharper with me than usual, short answers, long stares. When Dad asked if we wanted to order pizza, she quickly said she wasn't hungry, then spent the whole meal picking apart my teenage excitement when he left the room. Sophie sat quietly, glancing between us, like she knew better than to get in the middle. Looking back, that was the moment things tipped. Vanessa had always made me feel like I didn't belong, but now it wasn't just about dislike. She saw me as someone she needed to put back in my place. Maybe it was because she never had moments like that when she was my age. Maybe it was because no boy like Jake Miller ever looked twice at her, and hearing me talk about it made her feel smaller. Whatever it was, I could see the decision form behind her eyes. She wasn't going to let me have that night. The night before the dance, I stood in the bathroom mirror, brushing through my hair for the 100th time. I wanted it smooth and perfect for the next day. Every stroke of the brush made me feel calmer, like I was preparing for something important. My dress was hanging in the closet, my shoes waiting by the door. For once, everything felt ready. That's when Vanessa appeared in the doorway. Her smile was tight, the kind that never reached her eyes. "Need some help?" she asked, her voice light. I froze for a second, because she had never once offered to help me with anything like that before. But I was too focused on tomorrow to question it. Maybe she was finally trying to be kind, I told myself. She walked in slowly, her perfume filling the room, and took the brush right out of my hand. "Sit," she said softly, pulling a chair closer to the mirror. I obeyed, still uneasy but not wanting to start a fight. She brushed through my hair with slow, deliberate strokes, murmuring about how thick it was, how heavy it must feel. I almost let myself believe this was real, that she was just being a stepmother for once instead of a rival. Then I heard the snip. I turned my head too quickly, but it was already done. A thick lock of my hair lay across the tile floor, cleanly cut. I gasped and scrambled to stand, but she pushed me back down with surprising force. Before I could grab the scissors, she cut again, then again, hacking away with sharp, uneven slices. My chestnut hair, the hair I had cared for all my life, fell in chunks around me. "Stop! Please stop!" I cried, my voice breaking. I reached up to cover my head, but she kept yanking my hands away. Tears blurred my vision until all I could see was her face, twisted into something cruel. When she finally dropped the scissors, I stumbled up and faced the mirror. My reflection didn't look like me anymore. My hair was uneven, jagged, one side shorter than the other, the rest in harsh layers I had never asked for. It looked like someone had taken pleasure in ruining it. My chest tightened, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. "Why would you do this?" I begged, my voice shaking as I turned toward her. Her lips curved into a smirk, calm as if she hadn't just destroyed me. "Let's see if Jake still wants to take you now," she said. Then, with a tilt of her head, she added, "Beauty doesn't last forever, sweetheart." At that moment, the bathroom door opened, and my dad walked in. He stopped cold when he saw me, my hair scattered across the floor. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Vanessa was quick, too quick. She stepped forward and slipped into her practiced sweetness. "Oh, she wanted a fresh cut before the dance tomorrow," she said smoothly, resting a hand on my shoulder. I just helped her do it. I couldn't even find the words. My sobs were the only sound filling the room, while my dad stood there, confused and blind to the truth that was right in front of him. I ran straight to my room, slammed the door, and turned the lock. My hands shook as I slid down against the wall. Chunks of hair still clung to my clothes, reminding me of what had just happened. I pulled at the strands left on my head, trying to smooth them, but the mirror across the room only made me cry harder. It didn't look like me anymore. Everything I had taken care of for years was gone in minutes. The dress hanging in my closet suddenly felt like a cruel joke. I couldn't imagine putting it on now. The thought of walking into that gym with everyone staring at my ruined hair made my stomach twist. I knew people would whisper, laugh, maybe even take pictures. The one night I had looked forward to for so long had been stolen before it even began. I didn't leave my room all night. I ignored my dad knocking, ignored Sophie asking softly if I was okay. When the doorbell rang the next evening, I didn't even move from my bed. It was only when I heard my dad's voice downstairs greeting someone that I realized who it must be. Jake. Moments later, there was a knock at my bedroom door. Emily? It's me, Jake called gently. I froze. My heart raced, wanting to see him but terrified of what he'd think. I stayed silent, but he knocked again. Please, can I just talk to you? I finally unlocked the door and opened it a crack. He stood there holding a small bouquet of flowers, his smile fading when his eyes met mine. His gaze fell on my hair, and for a second, I thought he might laugh or step back. But he didn't. His eyes softened. You still look beautiful, he said firmly, like he meant every word. The kindness in his voice almost broke me. Tears spilled down my face as I shook my head. I can't go like this, Jake. Everyone will stare. I can't do it. He tried to reassure me, told me it didn't matter, that no one cared about my hair, that he just wanted to spend the night with me. But no matter how much I wanted to believe him, the shame was too heavy. I felt ruined, like the very thing that made me feel confident had been ripped away. I'm sorry, I whispered, stepping back. I can't. His shoulders slumped, but he didn't push me. He just handed me the flowers and said, I'll still be here tomorrow, before walking away. As I closed the door, I caught movement at the end of the hallway. Vanessa leaned against the wall, arms crossed, a smug little smile tugging at her lips. She had gotten exactly what she wanted, and she didn't even try to hide it. Later that night, Sophie passed by Vanessa's room and heard her on the phone. Vanessa's voice carried, full of satisfaction. Oh, I taught Emily a lesson, she said. She thinks she's so special. Not anymore. Sophie stood frozen outside the door, listening to every word. The next morning, I stayed in bed with the flowers Jake had brought resting on my nightstand. I hadn't even changed out of my clothes from the night before. My eyes were sore from crying, and I felt hollow. I barely noticed the soft knock at my door until it came a second time. Emily, it's me, Sophie's voice said quietly. I hesitated before opening the door. She stood there, arms wrapped around herself, looking nervous. She stepped in and closed the door behind her, glancing down the hall like she didn't want anyone to see her. For once, she didn't look like the shadow of her mother. She looked conflicted. She sat at the edge of my bed, avoiding my eyes at first. I heard Mom last night, she whispered. She was on the phone, bragging about what she did. She said she taught you a lesson. My chest tightened. Hearing it from Sophie's mouth was different from just feeling it in my gut. I had known Vanessa's act wasn't an accident, but having someone else confirm it made the truth sting deeper. She actually said that. My voice cracked as I asked. Sophie nodded quickly. I'm so sorry, Emily. I should have said something sooner. I always just go along with whatever she wants. I thought it was easier that way. But last night, hearing her laugh about hurting you, it didn't feel right anymore. It's not fair what she's doing to you. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Sophie had never once stood against her mom. If anything, she had always been on Vanessa's side, silent but present. To hear her admit guilt, to hear her apologize, it felt strange. I wiped at my eyes and sat up straighter. So it wasn't in my head, I murmured. She really wanted to ruin everything for me. Sophie looked at me then, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before, remorse. You're not crazy. She did it because she's jealous. I don't know why she's like this, but she's wrong. You didn't deserve it. Her words gave me a kind of validation I hadn't realized I needed. For so long, I'd felt like I was battling shadows, with no one else seeing what I saw. Now Sophie was sitting here, admitting it out loud. I let out a shaky breath and managed a small nod. Thank you for telling me. She bit her lip, then added, I want to help you. I don't know how, but I don't want to just sit back anymore. I don't want to be like her. It was the first time I saw Sophie as more than Vanessa's daughter. She was her own person, and maybe just as trapped as I felt. That morning, in that quiet room, something shifted between us. For the first time, I wasn't completely alone. In the days after the dance, I barely spoke. I went to school, came home, and shut myself in my room. My dad noticed. He asked questions at first, if I was feeling sick, if something happened at school, but I brushed him off. I didn't have the strength to explain, and even if I tried, I wasn't sure he'd believe me. What I didn't realize was that Sophie had started pulling away from Vanessa too. She didn't follow her around as much, and she didn't laugh at her jokes like before. My dad picked up on that as well. It wasn't just me anymore who seemed weighed down. One evening, while I was upstairs, Dad came home early from work. He stopped in the hallway when he heard Vanessa on the phone in the kitchen. She was speaking loudly, not knowing he was there. She thought she was going to walk into that dance like a queen, Vanessa said with a laugh. Well, I cut her down to size. Literally. Dad froze, his hand still on his briefcase. He listened as she went on, mocking the way I had cried, saying I would get over it, and learn not to be so full of myself. It was the first time the mask slipped in front of him, even if she didn't know he was listening. Something broke in that moment. The picture he had held of her as a caring stepmother. He walked upstairs after she hung up, his face pale, his mind racing. He didn't say anything right away, not to me, not to her. But from that night on, I could feel the difference. He started watching more closely. When Vanessa made a snide comment under her breath, Dad's eyes flicked toward her. When I sat at the dinner table, and she cut me off or shifted praise to Sophie, he didn't laugh it off any. He studied her, quiet but alert. He also started noticing Sophie's unease. She used to look at her mom with automatic loyalty, but now her eyes darted toward me instead. She sat closer to me at the table, offered to pass me things before Vanessa did, small acts that didn't escape Dad's attention. Vanessa, of course, didn't notice the shift. She was too confident in her ability to keep up appearances. She still spoke sweetly when Dad was in the room, still called me sweetheart, in that false voice. But Dad had heard enough to know the truth. And once doubt settled in, it only grew stronger each day. I didn't know then what he had overheard. All I knew was that something had changed in him. He looked at me longer, like he was searching for signs he had missed before. He paid attention when Vanessa spoke, measuring every word. Slowly, carefully, the blindfold was coming off. Dinner that night started like any other. Vanessa served the food with her usual false cheer, making small talk about the neighbors, asking Sophie about her homework, pretending everything was fine. I kept my eyes on my plate, pushing food around without much appetite. Sophie sat beside me, unusually quiet, glancing at me now and then. My dad barely touched his fork. He looked tired, but his jaw was set in a way that made me nervous. Halfway through the meal, he put his fork down and looked straight at Vanessa. I want to know what really happened with Emily's hair, he said firmly. The air in the room shifted. Vanessa blinked, then gave a light laugh. We've talked about this, Robert. She wanted a new look, and I helped her with it. Teenagers change their minds all the time. Dad didn't move. I heard you the other night. On the phone. You weren't helping her. You were mocking her. You cut her hair because you wanted to hurt her. Isn't that the truth? The color drained from her face for a second, then came back in a rush of red. She slammed her fork down, her voice rising. Oh, for God's sake, Robert. Fine, you want the truth? She walks around this house like she's some princess. Everyone fawns over her, talking about how beautiful she is, how much she looks like her mother. Do you know what that feels like? To stand next to her and be invisible in my own home. Her words spilled out, sharp and fast, no longer controlled. You always favor her. You look at her like she's perfect, like she can do no wrong. And I'm supposed to smile and pretend it doesn't bother me? Well, I'm tired of it. She needed to be reminded she's not better than the rest of us. I froze in my seat, my chest tight. My dad's face went pale as he listened, horrified. He glanced at me, then back at her, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Vanessa, he said slowly, she's a child. My child. You resent her for existing? For looking like her mother? For being loved? Vanessa didn't answer right away. Her breathing was sharp, her eyes burning with anger she couldn't hide anymore. That's when Sophie spoke up. Her voice trembled, but it was steady enough. Dad's right. Mom's been lying. I heard her the night before the dance. She said she wanted to teach Emily a lesson. She bragged about it on the phone afterward. She didn't do it to help her. She did it to humiliate her. The room fell silent. Vanessa's head whipped toward Sophie, her eyes wide with shock. Sophie, she hissed, how dare you? But Sophie didn't back down. For once, she kept her eyes on me, then on Dad. I can't cover for her anymore. Emily didn't deserve it. The weight of her words hung in the air. My dad leaned back, his expression hardening as the truth settled in fully. The mask was gone, and all that was left was the ugly resentment Vanessa had tried to hide. The night of that dinner ended with shouting and doors slamming. My dad didn't wait to think it over. He told Vanessa to pack her things and leave. She tried to argue, tried to twist the story back into her favor, but it was useless. The words she had spilled couldn't be taken back, and Sophie's confession sealed it. My dad stood firm for the first time, saying clearly that he would not let anyone treat me that way, not in his house. Within a week, he had spoken to a lawyer and started the process of divorce. Vanessa left, furious and bitter, muttering under her breath about how he'd regret it. She expected Sophie to follow her, but Sophie refused. She chose to stay with us, her voice steady when she said she couldn't live under her mother's roof anymore. Vanessa stormed off alone, and for the first time, the house felt lighter. It didn't take long for people in town to find out what had happened. Parents at school whispered about it during drop-offs and at the grocery store. Word spread fast that Vanessa had chopped off her stepdaughter's hair out of jealousy. The story shocked people, and not in a way that made her look strong. Instead, she became the subject of hushed conversations and judgmental stares. The polished image she had worked so hard to maintain cracked completely. Her friends pulled away. Some pretended not to know her when they saw her in public. Others stopped inviting her to gatherings. The more she tried to explain herself, the worse it sounded. Everyone agreed on one thing. A grown woman had deliberately hurt a teenage girl out of spite. No excuse could make that right. Meanwhile, life inside our home slowly began to change. Sophie and I were cautious with each other at first, but the wall between us started to crumble. She sat with me while I studied, we cooked dinner together, and for the first time, we laughed like real sisters. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. As for me, I still flinched when I looked in the mirror at first. But after a while, I began to see something new in my reflection. My short, uneven haircut reminded me of what had been taken from me, but it also reminded me of what I had survived. I started to style it differently, finding ways to make it my own. People at school even told me it looked bold, that I pulled it off with confidence. I realized they were right. I was stronger than I thought. Vanessa, on the other hand, was left alone with no one to side with her. The bitterness she carried turned into isolation, and the power she once had over us slipped away for good. She thought she had broken me, but in the end, she was the one who lost everything. Months passed, and life slowly settled into something that felt steady again. By then, my hair had started to grow back. The jagged ends were trimmed into a neat shape, and what was left was healthier than it had ever been. Every time I ran my fingers through it, I no longer thought about what Vanessa had done, but about how far I had come since that night. Sophie and I had grown close in ways I never expected. We shared late-night talks, swapped clothes, and teased each other like sisters usually do. She admitted often that she wished she had spoken up sooner, but I always told her the same thing. It mattered that she spoke up when it counted. Together, we made the house feel like a real family home, one filled with laughter instead of tension. Jake never pulled away either. He kept showing up, walking me to class, inviting me out for milkshakes, and treating me the same way he always had. He didn't care about the hair, and over time I started to believe him. He reminded me that people who truly care don't vanish when something changes on the outside. They stay because of who you are inside. Meanwhile, Vanessa's life spun in the opposite direction. With the divorce finalized and her reputation in ruins, she found herself without the support she had relied on for so long. The friends who once gossiped with her now avoided her calls. Parents at school looked the other way when she walked by. Even family gatherings she tried to attend were awkward, with people whispering behind her back. The polished mask she wore had cracked, and no one wanted to stand next to what was left. Sometimes, I'd see her in town, walking quickly, sunglasses on even when it wasn't sunny. She avoided eye contact, and I could tell she was aware of the whispers that followed her. The woman who once thought she could control every room now had no one to listen. At home, we didn't talk about her much anymore. My dad focused on us, making sure the house felt safe and whole. Sophie and I focused on school, on friends, on normal things. Life was far from perfect, but it was ours, and it was peaceful. One evening, I stood in front of the mirror, brushing through my shorter hair, now fuller and softer than before. I thought about everything that had happened, the jealousy, the cruelty, the pain, and how it all led here. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because I finally understood. My stepmother thought she could break me by taking away what I loved most, I whispered to myself. But instead, she lost everything, and I found out who truly loved me. And for the first time in a long while, I believed every word.